embarrassment because Gertrude has made such a terrible mistake in marrying Claudius. So then Gertrude repeats her question. So he hasn't really answered it. He's just said, such a deed, such an act. So she asks again, seriously, what have I done that is so incredibly bad? And this time he replies with a monologue. So Hamlet says, look upon this picture and on this. So that line indicates to the audience reading the script that in the play he has props with him. He has got two images, one of his father, Hamlet Senior, and one of Claudius. So in your essay writing, you can talk about the use of props, and this is one of the moments when props are being used. So it's creating a visual for the audience watching, a visual comparison between Claudius and Hamlet Senior. So then when he's talking about the two pictures that he's got, he calls it a counterfeit presentment. So literally, it's counterfeit because it is an image of the two men, not their actual selves, not Claudius and Hamlet standing next to each other. So their word counterfeit there is an appropriate word to use, but it does also have connotations of deceit. So it links back to the underlying themes of treachery and betrayal. So then basically he starts off describing his father in the picture. So he's saying Hamlet Senior was so good looking. He has Hyperion's curls. He's got the body of Jove. He's got eyes like Mars, and he's got the position of Mercury. So he's using a lot of allusion to Roman mythology in order to add prestige to King Hamlet, his father. And he does say, every god did seem to set his seal, as in he was blessed by the heavens in his physical appearance and in his intellect as well. And then he uses the very short, simple sentence, this was your husband, and contrasts that with the next line, he is your husband. So the repetition of the phrase your husband really draws home the fact that he thinks that she's done the wrong thing in remarrying, especially remarrying Claudius. So then he says, like a mildewed ear. So he's talking about an ear of corn, that's gone mouldy. So the simile there, if you just think about it, so he's just compared his father to all of these Roman gods, and then he compares Claudius to being a mouldy corn cob who brings his brother down. So then he uses the rhetorical questions to indicate his absolute disbelief that anyone in their right mind could possibly go from such an amazing paragon of virtue as Hamlet Senior to such a disgusting, corrupt person as Claudius. And so he uses the metaphor of moving from a fair mountain to a moor. So the fair mountain is Hamlet Senior, and the moor, the plain, is Claudius. And then again he repeats the rhetorical question, have you eyes? So that question. Then the next thing that he says from a modern perspective is quite offensive, and if I were there I probably would have hit him for saying it, but never mind, Gertrude takes it fairly well, I think. But he says, you cannot call it love, at your age, the heyday in the blood is tame, it's humble, and waits upon the judgment. So he's basically saying that because Gertrude's really old, she doesn't know what love is anymore. She just does what's best for her intellect. So her decisions are based on reason, not emotion, because she's old enough not to really feel emotion anymore. So apart from the fact that I find that wildly offensive, it's quite interesting for the theme of intellect versus emotion. So it's basically suggesting that when you're young, you're at the mercy of your emotion, and then when you become older, you're able to use your reason. So there's a value weighted in that with age comes wisdom, and that's being able to focus on your intellect rather than your emotion. So it is showing that he thinks that the intellect is more important than emotion. Let me just highlight the rest of that. So then he says, sense sure you have, but that sense is apoplexed. So he's saying, I know you're not mad, but it's an act of madness to move from Hamlet to Claudius. So then he asks, what devil was it that hath cozened you at Hoodman blind? So he's basically saying that Gertrude is blind, that she's wearing a blindfold in order to choose Claudius. And he goes on to say what's wrong with her for making that choice. He says that she has eyes without feeling, feeling without sight, ears without hands or eyes, smelling without any other ability to do anything, and then all but a sickly part of one true sense. So again, he's using that imagery of illness in order to describe the mistake that she's made. Then he exclaims, "O shame, where is thy blush?" And he says, if old people have no morals, then young people certainly can't, because they follow the example of the older people in the community. So it shows that he thinks that the whole society is going to break down as a result of Gertrude's mistake in moving on to Claudius. And then he finishes off by saying that her current actions show that reason is pandering to will. So her reason, her intellect is helping her passion, is helping her emotions by making false arguments and false logic to support it. So it's sort of saying that she has avoided the whole intellect versus emotion issue by letting her reason support her emotions, even if it shouldn't. And so Gertrude tells him, please stop, and she says, you're making me examine my soul. So mission accomplished, that's what he set out to do, that's what he wanted when he sat her down. And she says when she looks at her soul, she sees black and grained spots that won't go away, they're stained on there. So that's strongly symbolic and a nice bit of imagery as well about her sense of guilt. And so Hamlet doesn't let it go, despite the fact that she's asked him to stop and that she understands. He keeps going. So he gets even more nasty here. So he says, nay, but to live in the rank sweat of an enseamed bed, stewed in corruption, honeying and making love over the nasty sty. So that phrase, nasty sty, he's referring to the bed that Gertrude sleeps with Claudius in, and he's referring to it as a sty, so a place where pigs eat. And he also refers to the bed as being covered in rank sweat. So he's pretty openly talking about her sexual life with Claudius there, which is really, again, we talked about this with the way that he was talking to Ophelia. It was absolutely inappropriate and out of line for him to have that conversation in this time period with anyone, let alone with his mother. And stewed in corruption is also quite a negative image to have of his mother. So Gertrude is upset again. She says, speak to me no more. These words like daggers enter in mine ears. Interesting for two reasons. First of all, Hamlet openly said at the end of Act 3, Scene 2, that he wanted his words to be daggers. So we can see as an audience that he's achieving his aim there. It's also interesting because she says that the daggers enter into her ears, and we've just seen in the mouse trap the poison being poured into the ear in order to kill Hamlet Senior. So there's a bit of repetition there in the way that King Hamlet was killed and in the way that Gertrude's feelings are being hurt by her son. And she begs him to stop, leave me alone, stop telling me this information. But Hamlet's on a roll now, so he keeps going, and he starts talking about Claudius. So notice that all the insults that he has here are class-based. So he calls Claudius a murderer, a villain, a slave, a vice. When he says vice, he means clown. He calls him a cutpurse, a thief, and who stole Gertrude, who he refers to as a precious diadem. And Gertrude keeps interrupting, asking him to stop. And Hamlet once more refers to Claudius as a king of shreds and patches, so referring to him as a clown. And then the ghost enters. So we might leave this here, and I will pick up the rest of this scene in the next video.